Hey guys, it's Godbars here, the self-proclaimed hip-hop historian, and this is the 57th episode of my series where I grab a vinyl from my collection, talk about why I love it, what influence it had, and what its place is in the grand scheme of hip-hop. So I actually had another New York album in this spot originally, but I made kind of a last-minute switch to an album that I got just recently, Ice Cube's Ruthless debut. I think which solo album is Cube's best can flip-flop depending on who you ask, but for me, it would probably have to be America's Most Wanted. Following his departure from NWA, Cube would begin recording songs for his debut using a notebook of rhymes he had originally written for Eazy-E. According to both Dr. Dre and Ice Cube, the two wanted Dre to produce the latter's first solo album, but the higher-ups at the label nicked this idea. This resulted in Cube going to his contemporary and inspiration Chuck D, who then helped hook him up with the legendary Bomb Squad. Along with Sir Jinx and other Lynch Mob members, the Bomb Squad would do most of the production here, making this album sound totally different from anything else going on the West Coast at the time. Hugh was no stranger to rough and noisy beats, and him meeting up with Hank Shock Lee and the rest was a match made in heaven. For me, 1990 is one of those years that doesn't feel like it belongs in its decade. To me, it fits more with the late 80s rap output, and what we now know as traditional 90s hip hop started coming into its own in like 92 or 93. That's how I perceive it, at least. When I was younger and still newer to hip hop, I actually did think Low End Theory and even the Far Side's first album were from the late 80s. It isn't that they sound dated at all, but America's Most Wanted feels closer to Straight Outta Compton or It Takes a Nation of Millions than it does to Doggy Style or even The Chronic. I think the reason for this was the prototypical G-Funk sound the West would become known for hadn't really been developed yet. The relationship between the two coasts would only get worse as the 90s unraveled, so this move of going to the most experimental and forward-thinking New York production crew only sticks out more in retrospect. Obviously, I still enjoy all the G-Funk classics as much as the next guy, and Ice Cube would undeniably play a huge role in that with his later albums. However, this debut LP isn't relaxed or made for you to vibe to in your drop top. It's aggressive, socio-political, and confrontational. Just to give you an example of where hip-hop was at the time, some of the other important rap albums to drop alongside America's Most Wanted in 1990 were Fear of a Black Planet, Sex Packets by Digital Underground, Wanted Dead or Alive by Cool G Rap and DJ Polo, and Brand Nubian's debut album, as well as debuts from legends like Masta Ace, A Tribe Called Quest, and Above the Law. While these and many more from that year are more than worth your time, it's hard to argue that 1990 isn't one of the more stacked years in terms of material, since hip hop was still spreading and developing. But what the early 90s may lack in quantity, it more than makes up for in quality, especially in the case of artists like Tribe, Ghetto Boys, or Ice Cube, of course. The passion and in-your-face delivery is easy to see as old and outplayed now, but when you think about how the more safe, popular rap songs of the time sounded, you can imagine how hardcore and unprecedented this album could come across at the time. His crystal clear diction and point blank approach can feel like he's staring you right in the eyes while he verbally tears you apart, holding no punches. He'll tell you exactly what messed up, unethical incidents happened with racist police, or what systematic barriers he witnessed both in the hood or in the music industry. I feel like another big aspect of this project is a kind of predecessor to a theme Eminem would constantly use across his first couple albums, this being the tendency to directly address fans and critics and not normally in a way that's particularly favorable. There's multiple examples of that on America's Most Wanted, but the most well-known and notable one is probably the NWA member that you love to hate. In this classic track, Cube gives us one lyrical gem after another like, I never tell you to get down, it's all about coming up, or it ain't about how right or wrong you live, but how long you live. That song also has one of my favorite instrumentals on the entire project, which is this jerky and mechanical, yet funky beat that not many artists outside the Bomb Squad would even think to make at the time. America's Most Wanted is littered with those moments that range from funky and groovy to robotic and jerky, both of which are lifted up even further through Cube's attention-demanding voice and presentation. A younger casual fan may overlook it now, but there's a reason that there's so many memes about Ice Cube having a scary, serious face. It's all part of this slightly exaggerated character he channels all his personal takes and opinions through. He also left virtually no room for anyone to accuse him of being a one-album wonder or some rapper who had an insanely successful debut and never lived back up to it. Obviously, with Straight Outta Compton already being the powerhouse it was, it isn't exactly like this was a completely unheard of rapper just coming out, but some people aren't able to capture the magic they had in their group when they go to do their own solo work. So when Cube hit it out of the park again, just 1 year later in 1991 with Death Certificate, it became blatant that he knew what he was doing, and the success of his first solo LP was no fluke. Even after his second album, Cube still wouldn't take a break, releasing further classics in both 1992 and 1993, which has led him to have one of the most stacked discographies when it comes to the first half of the 90s. There's multiple features on here that elevate this thing to the next level, if that was even possible. We have both Chuck D and Flava Flav of Public Enemy, as well as Lil Russ and LA legend Yo-Yo, who has a dope back and forth with Cube that reminds me of the type of thing later rappers like Doom and Kendrick would later dip a toe into. For this groundbreaker, my three favorites would probably have to be The Gentleman You Love to Hate, Turn Off the Radio, and Endangered Species or Tales from the Dark Side. I have to give some honorable mentions as well, which would be A Gangsta's Fairy Tale, The Bomb, Once Upon a Time in the Projects, What They Hit Info, You Can't Fade Me slash JD's Gafflin, Who's the Mac, and the title track. Thank you for watching my 57th video, and if you enjoyed, be sure to like, subscribe, and let me know what your favorite songs off this masterpiece that dominated the West Coast are. Don't forget to have a great day, and I'll see you next time, okay? Alright.